Come to the last overhaul piece on the braking system of this old bike, the rear master cylinder. You can probably tell my voice is a little bit croaky. I got a touch of the dreaded lurgy, which probably means I won't be talking as much, which is probably a good thing. It's no doubt a good thing. Nonetheless, I'm going to pop the top off this reservoir, drain the fluid out, get this master cylinder off the bike, overhaul all the rubbers, seals, change the spring. Because as I've said before, one of the dangers in an old bike is that things you can't see are on the verge of not working very well, such as rubbers and seals. And the last thing, I guess in real terms, the rear brake master cylinder is probably not as critical as the front brake for when you're travelling on the highway at highway speeds. But nonetheless, you don't want to lose your rear brake either. So, about to put new brake lines on this bike, front and rear. So let's get this rear brake master cylinder totally overhauled so that I know everything's got all new rubbers and seals in it. It's not going to let me down. So I'll get to work. Just a bit of an overview, I guess. This is your rear brake master cylinder back here. You have your rear brake pedal, which through a pivot here and a thing called a clevis applies mechanical advantage via a push rod right up into the base and pushes a piston inside this cylinder of the master cylinder. And what happens, that cylinder is full of brake fluid, kept in good supply from the reservoir here via a rubber tube. And then when you push your brake pressure, it puts a force through that fluid, which is then conveyed by the top of this master cylinder via a banjo on the fuel line that then runs, we can't see it too well from there, right round the back and eventually to your rear caliper. So you convey your braking force in an ingenious way here directly through to the rear caliper. Now, this here is a little boot. On top of this sits a switch that goes to the rear brake light. So, but this highlights the issue. I don't know whether you can see it from that angle, but a very degraded boot here, which for me, one of the things that's a bit of a non-negotiable in doing up a 25-year-old bike is the fact that a lot of these rubbers, both externally and even more worryingly internally, like your seals and rubbers inside your calipers and your master cylinders, I think there's always a risk that they're, if not failing, on the verge of failing. So for me, particularly the braking system, as you know, I'm going through it and changing all rubbers, all seals. I think it's very important. And yeah, in the same process I'll be changing some of these less critical things like a rubber boot protecting the switch. Anyway, that's how the system works. I'll be detaching that master cylinder, get this reservoir drained and off first, detach the master cylinder, detach the clevis pin here and get the clevis and the push rod off, and we'll just overhaul the whole damn thing. First thing I want to do is just release the pressure on the reservoir. And release this little clamp here. Actually just attach the reservoir. Some pretty murky looking brake fluid there. Set that aside on a rag. pieces. The master cylinder itself, still with the clevis attached. The actual lock nut on top of the banjo, which has the pins for the rear brake switch. And a pretty dirty, mucky looking reservoir. And yeah, the diaphragm and lid look fine. Anyway, first thing I'm going to do is just detach this clevis from the push rod, so I can detach the whole assembly. Then I'm going to give it a little bit of a clean up, everything, then we'll pull it to bits. And just like I did with the front one, once again I've got a rear caliper, a rear master cylinder overhaul kit from TRK Braking. So all the bits in there, get new bits. So I'll go from there. First thing I'm going to do is just loosen this lock nut. So, note the position of this. I've taken a photo just to note how the lock nut was in relative to the thread. Just gonna okay. We can just wind the clevis off. Next thing I might do is just dislodge this boot. It's going to get replaced with a new one, I believe. I hope. Just clipped over a little groove there. That. And then there's another circlip in here that we need to see, a little circlip that's holding the whole piston and push rod assembly in there. There we are. So squeeze those together and you extract your little circlip like that, and the whole piston assembly comes out. So with that out, we should be able to pull it out completely. There we are. So there we have it, the spring with the secondary seal, your little piston with the primary seal. And yeah, it's an interesting system. It's got a concave section in here, and the push rod has a very much a conical or a convex top on it, so obviously it doesn't have to be perfectly positioned. Interesting design. Anyway, I think I'll get to work and give all these a bit of a clean up, and then we'll look what we got in the replacement kit. It's my clean patch, my brake cleaner. Don't forget, I better say in every video, make sure you don't need oil-based or petroleum-based cleaners in this job. You want to keep the brake components totally free of oil or water. Soap-based stuff, no, you don't want anything like that. You just want to use your ethanol-based cleaners. Dries quickly, doesn't leave a residue. It's perfectly designed for braking system clean. That whole piston actually, the seal there looks quite pitted. It's good to be replacing this guy. Doesn't look so good. So I'll give the clevis a bit of a clean up because we're using him again. lock nut. Pretty good. Last but not least, the old cylinder itself. Let's just have a little bit of a look down there. A little bit of gunk. I think by and large it looks pretty good. That all looks beautiful and clean in there. Cylinder looks in fantastic nick. Looks in great condition. Okay. Now the reservoir. A little bit dirty and mucky there. There's a bit of rubbish in the bottom of it. So I'll give him a good clean up as well. It's looking a bit better. Okay, well I've laid out my kit from TRK Braking here. It's a little bit confusing. Here's the original stuff. The original spring comes with a little plate on the end with a hole and the spigot in the secondary seal that sits on there quite nicely. The old piston, as I said earlier, is a little bit degraded looking. The boot's actually in really good condition, and the circlip looks fine. But strangely enough, in my TRK kit, there's no sign of a new boot or a new circlip. And the other thing that I don't like, I guess, is that this spring doesn't have a seat on the bottom, and this new secondary seal is not really held in position in the same way. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't matter. That's probably how they do it these days. There's definitely a boot missing and a circlip missing, so I've got to get on to them about that. So, I notice on the original Triumph one here, this little plate on the bottom is actually spot welded on there. It's actually spot welded. It's a really nice little setup. And there's a little spigot, a rubber spigot there. That secondary seal sits there quite nicely. It's quite, once you pop it on there, it's quite robust. But the new one they've got for me here has no such no such plate or spigot, although they've given me a spigot with a hole in it. Quite optimistically hoping that hole's going to hold that there, but it's not going to work. I mean, once it's inside the cylinder, that'll probably hold it in place. But anyway, I think before I put this back together, I'll be back onto TRK and find out where my boot and my circlip are. Okay, well, it's now a week later. I've actually checked back with the supplier of the TRK parts, and believe it or not, there's no replacement boot or circlip included in the TRK brake overhaul kit. Go figure. So as far as I can tell, the only option, if I wanted to replace those parts as part of this overhaul, would be to go back to a Triumph OEM set, which would cost a lot more and would take quite a while to order in, and would be necessary, of course, if the boot needed replacing. So this original boot that I've just taken off is actually in very good condition, and the circlip is fine. I've got a box of new circlips anyway, so I may well replace that one. Bottom line, yeah, might put even an image up on the screen, but for some reason TRK Braking supplies all the replacement parts for the front master cylinder, but for the rear master cylinder, totally minus a replacement circlip and boot. Go figure. Anyway, for now, I've decided I'm going to reuse the old boot, and I'll go ahead and reassemble this master cylinder and put it all back on the bike. Need a little bit of red rubber grease here. And some some new brake fluid. So I'm just going to start by lubricating the inside of the bore with some new brake fluid. Just let that run down there, run down either side. The first thing we put in is the spring. The larger end of the spring goes down the bottom of the bore, and on top of that, this little secondary seal that has this rather useless spigot. In this sense, it's useless because the spring hasn't got a holder for the spigot, but anyway, I know this is going to reasonably well hold within the bore just due to the width of it. So a little bit of red rubber grease. Once again, like I mentioned in doing all the calipers and the front master cylinder, it's just a smear. You don't want globs of grease there. And then it's a matter of inserting that down into the bore, pushing that down top of the spring. Then on top of that, of course, comes the piston. Now the piston has a concave end here. That concave end points up and engages with the push rod, so make sure you get it going in the right way. Once again, on the rubber seal, the primary seal, this one, just a smear of red rubber grease. I mean, if you want to be total purist, you could just use some brake fluid itself. But my understanding, belief, is that the red rubber grease is actually better for the rubber, actually more likely to maintain the integrity of the rubber over a longer period. Okay, so that goes in on top. Sorry, wrong way. The convex pad up, and that's got a lovely, neat little fit in there under the pressure of the spring. And of course, there's a little groove around the top here, which is where we're going to hold in with our circlip. Now that circlip then holds in this whole push rod assembly, which will sit down in the top. The push rod assembly is held into place using this big washer here. So basically that forces its way down on top of that, and we hold that assembly in place using the circlip. So it's a bit of an exercise here in fitting the circlip over the top, putting some pressure on the push rod so that holds that down into place, and then using your circlip pliers, grabbing hold of the push rod clicking that down, and I felt that click nicely into the groove there. And there we have it, the circlip and push rod assembly is now firmly in place and held there by that circlip. Okay, last but not least in that process is the reinsertion of the boot. So once again, just to look after the rubber, I'm going to put a little bit of red rubber grease all around the base of the boot. Okay, and that's going down over the top. And of course, checking then that the top of the boot is clipped into the little groove just below that nut. There's a nice little groove there that the boot sits into. It's sitting in there nicely. Okay, job done. Okay, then the next job is to fit the clevis back onto the push rod. Now, when I was pulling this to bits, I mentioned that it's a good idea just to note the number of threads between the lock nut here and the base bolt of the push rod. So just wind your knock, this is how I'm going to do it anyway. Wind your lock nut there so that the number of threads, in my case was 4, is right. So take the nut, just fit it into the clevis there like that. Sort of, you can hold it in place on both sides, and then you turn that whole thing as a single entity to get it mounted. There we are, it's got it started. Once it's started, you can just turn the whole clevis and the nut will come in together, keeping account of your number of threads that are exposed there. So keep pulling the clevis up and tightening that down. Now eventually you want to lock that, so you want to hold your lock nut, and like I did when I pulled it to bits, I just grabbed a pair of pliers here to put some turning torque onto the clevis. And there we are. I think that's going to be similar to what it was before. I've got my 4 threads exposed, so that should be quite similar to how it was when I took it off the bike. Okay, I think we're ready now to go and take the whole master cylinder and push rod assembly and mount that back on the bike. And then subsequently, if you remember, we'll mount the reservoir and the reservoir hose. Actually, I'll do the reservoir hose now. We'll go and do it all together at the same time. So I'll just pop that reservoir hose on there, up nice and snug. Take our pliers and bring that clamp bolt up over the barbed end. There we go. So that hose isn't going anywhere. Looks about right. And then this one will go over the master cylinder barbed end once it's mounted on the bike. So we'll go and put it on the bike. Okay, first thing I'll just remove some of the pieces I was just sitting in place. So pop out the clevis pin. Pop out these screws that I've just been sitting in there. And then bring the longer one. Longer one goes on the bottom. And let's look at how we position this master cylinder. So here's the brake hose fitting, that's up the top, the reservoir's up there. So this will sit like that. And the clevis pin fits into the bracket down the bottom there like that. So that looks like how we're going. Now, I'm just going to add a wee bit of medium grade thread locker, because there seems to be some evidence that some thread locker was used on these master cylinder retaining bolts previously, so I'm just going to put a little dab there. Of course, the master cylinder mounting holes themselves are threaded, so there's no nut in this case. So let's put that up into place. See if I can wind that guy and find the thread. Okay, it's got him started. Just very, very loosely put him on for a start. That's it. And then do the same with the bottom one. A wee touch of medium grade thread locker. See if we can find that thread on the master cylinder again. There she is. Okay, that's just finger tight for now. So we'll relocate the clevis onto the brake lever using our lovely little pin. Push that up into position. It's a spot for the pin to go through. And we'll just reinstall this little clip on the other side. There we are. It's clipped him on. And that's moving very freely, coming back nicely under the control of the spring, and there's a spring on the brake pedal of course as well. Okay, what's next? I might install this master cylinder on here to the correct torque, which is actually 27 Newton meters. Here's a torque wrench I prepared earlier. Okay, master cylinder back on, push rod and piston working. Next thing, we want to reinstall our reservoir. So, I've got a little mounting pin that I kept in the place from last time. Let's have a look how this goes. So we need to slip our little hose over the master cylinder. Grab our pliers and move our little clamp down so we can secure that over the barbed end of that pipe. There we are. Secure that into place. Master cylinder is nicely connected to the reservoir there now. What did I do this thing up with? Goodness. Okay, see if we can find somewhere to mount this. I think that's a threaded, the actual mounting bracket for this is threaded as well from memory. So, okay, that's started. I won't do that one up too tight, just a snug fit I would say. And there we are. Now, just to avoid any rubbish getting down the top of the master cylinder, I'm just going to reinstall the banjo bolt there with the tail light clip on it, just in there to stop things getting on. And that's it. Master cylinder's overhauled, albeit without a new boot and circlip. But nonetheless, I'm confident now. I've got some good seals actually within the cylinder, primary and secondary seal, and that's back on. Everything working smoothly, there's no grabbing there, so I think we're ready for the next stage. And the last stage in the braking system overhaul is my new brake lines, which I'm looking forward to putting on, and then bleeding the whole system, testing it out, and the braking system is go. Okay, thanks for watching. Hope that was helpful. Bye.